Did the first atomic bomb that was detonated in New Mexico in 1945 send a shockwave across the universe? This was then followed by the dropping of atom bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki in 1945. Was it a clarion call to aliens to say that the previous harmless human race had found something so powerful that could destroy all of creation? It seems that after these events there seemed to be a flurry of activity, with people seeing UFOs in our skies. Josef Allen Hynek was an American astronomer, professor and ufologist. He was best known for his UFO research. Hynek acted as a scientific advisor to UFO studies undertaken by the US Air Force. Dr. Hynek is well known for working with the US Air Force, leading investigations of sightings under Project Blue Book. However, Dr. Hynek quickly realized that he was seen more as an instrument to dismiss alien speculation than as a scientist tasked with exploring such possibilities, and found himself in conflict with the restrictive supervision of the Air Force. During his research, he realized that there were UFO cases that seemed to have national security implications, where military staff were witness to incidents back to the 1960s, when nuclear missile silos were being interfered with, and had incidents over numerous ICBM bases, that is, intercontinental ballistic missiles, during the Cold War, that did not come from the Soviet Union, but UFOs. This was a serious matter because there were ICBM bases located throughout northern parts of the United States that were within striking distance of the Soviet Union. The following are two major incidents that took place in the 1960s. Minot Air Force Base, North Dakota, 1966. During that period, Air Force members from the Minot base experienced an incident in the Minot missile field in which a flying object took off alert all 10 of the nuclear-tipped missiles, causing them to be unlaunchable. About a dozen military members at the missile launch control facility observed the mysterious flying object with bright flashing lights hovering in the perimeter fence on that September night. David Schindel, an ICBM launch control officer and deputy missile combat crew commander, was at a launch control center where the incident occurred. Air Force officials instructed the military members at the launch control facility and those who knew about the incident never to speak about it, and as far as they should be concerned, it never happened. Malmstrom Air Force Base, Montana, 1967. In 1967, there was another incident at an Air Force base in Montana where a Lieutenant Robert Salas in the US Air Force was stationed. On the night of March 24, 1967, Lieutenant Salas, 26, was stationed 20 meters below the Montana prairie, overseeing weaponry that was capable of obliterating millions of people. Then, without any warning, Lieutenant Salas said his cluster of 10 intercontinental ballistic missiles beneath the Malmstrom Air Force Base seemed to be under attack. But the assailants weren't the Soviet Union, because Soviet technology was not capable of disabling the missile's guidance and control systems, which is what happened that night. Signals were sent to each missile, and within seconds they had no power. Before the 1966 incident, it had never happened before, and even today they have nothing that could do that. Moments before the system's failure, a security officer on the surface made a series of frenzied phone calls to Lieutenant Salas describing an oval-shaped form, pulsating, glowing orange-red lights hovering over the installation. The officer also described the approach of the silent object, which was making unusual controlled maneuvers, such as flying very fast, coming to a dead stop, then reversing course and making 90-degree turns. The officer was screaming on the phone, terrified. He was told to secure the facility at all costs, and responding to his orders, other security guards scrambled to other launch sites in the complex, only to see glowing objects hovering over them. It was reported they lost radio contact with the flight security controller and were very shaken by the experience. Less than a minute after the pulsating object had arrived over the launch control center, it quickly departed. The confused officer then found himself in a meeting with his squadron commander and a special investigations officer, and was told the incident didn't involve any kind of Air Force exercise, and was also told to never speak of the incident as it was now classified. Just like the incident 1 year earlier in 1966 at Minot Air Force Base in North Dakota, Lieutenant Salas had to sign a non-disclosure agreement and did not talk about it until 1996. Shortly after the incident, guards who had been at the base at the time of the incident literally begged him to come out and see them because this was an extremely traumatic experience for them. But because he had signed a non-disclosure agreement, he had to tell them on the phone that he could not see them. Lieutenant Salas' story is identical to what Lieutenant Robert Jamison had experienced. He said that sometime during the evening he received a call from the main guard upstairs who told him that there were strange lights flying over the facility. They were reddish-orange in colour with a glowing, pulsating light. It was hovering just above the front gate. It was hovering and motionless and without a sound. They said there was a solid object within the light that was sort of oval-shaped. Lieutenant Jamison said to him, "You mean like UFOs?" And the guard laughed and said, "Well, they're not aeroplanes, sir." About 5 minutes later he calls back and is screaming into the phone. He was very frightened and babbling. He said they have all the guards out there with their weapons drawn. They wanted orders on what to do. Lieutenant Jamison told him to make sure nothing enters the fenced area. When the lieutenant hung up the phone, he thought they were under attack, but by who or what? He looked at the control panel and could see the lights going from green to red all across the board, meaning the missiles were now inoperable. If the president had given the order to launch the missiles, they could not have launched them. They had somehow lost 10 missiles in an instant. The objects were able to maneuver over the missile silos and turn them off. They knew the object was not a man-made machine because they had nothing like that. After the incident, he was told not to speak to anybody about it. Lieutenant Salas attempted to question the security guard who witnessed the light, and he said, "Sorry sir, I've been told to keep quiet," and was told that as far as you're concerned, it never happened. Lieutenant Jamison also had to go through a briefing where he signed an agreement and told not to say anything ever again. He never spoke about any of it until 1994. Lieutenant Salas later said that there's something in our atmosphere that we just don't know what it is, and these things seem to be interested in our nuclear capabilities, and there's something that we should be concerned about. Robert Salas had kept the incident a secret for 40 years, and he said it was a long time to have this burden on the back of his shoulders, but the public needs to know this. In 2001, David Schindel from the Minot Air Force Base incident in 1966 read an article about Robert Salas's incident and said, God, the incident that he described was almost identical to the one he had. He said he then experienced a joyful freedom and was finally able to tell his wife his secret. Over the years, many witnesses have been ridiculed and their life have been made miserable. Dr. J. Allen Hynek grew increasingly disillusioned by the Air Force's dismissive approach to the sightings and dismissive approach to the evidence. Dr. Hynek gradually realized that this was a subject that demanded a serious study. With the United States Air Force not taking UFOs investigation seriously, this left a large vacuum that civilian organizations began to fill. In 1974, Dr. Hynek founded the Center for UFO Studies, which was a civilian group composed of extremely qualified people that were highly trained. However, the incidence of UFOs flying over US bases was not confined to America. RAF Bentwaters in Suffolk, southeast England. RAF Bentwaters is a former Royal Air Force base about 80 miles northeast of London. After World War II, control of Bentwaters was transferred to the United States Air Force in 1951 by the Ministry of Defense and the United States Air Forces in Europe. However, the UF left the base in the early 90s. In 2016, former RAF detective Gary Heseltine claimed to have had communication with two RAF radar operators who were working at the Traffic Control Center at the time of the incident, who claimed to have picked up the UFO on radar the night of the sighting, where they claim it travelled over 190 kilometres in 8 seconds, which was not possible. Heseltine claims that the UFO was quite possibly interested in military information, as the base was storing nuclear weapons, which was in contravention of international treaties at the time, of which the aliens were possibly interested in. So as the US military personnel were trying to push the incident under the carpet, pretending that nothing had happened, at the same time were panicking knowing that they had illegal nuclear weapons stored at the base. In an episode of UFO Hunters, Colonel Holt claims that there was a man posted in the observation tower who told him that he observed beams of light coming from the UFO shining down into the high-security weapons storage area. However, Holt claims that the man posted in the observation after over 40 years will still not come forward and admit what he saw. Could he have been forced to sign an agreement not to say anything, and was still afraid of what the consequences would be if he told the truth as to what actually happened.